What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and in this video, I'm going to explain to you why Fnatic will not win the Spring Championship. And I've gone through all the teams so far, and most of them have been just kind of discussing the team, and I'm going to do that in this video for Fnatic. But I also want to talk about the limitations of their team, and I think people who watch me consistently probably know where I'm going with this, but it's important, like, when there's so much positive sentiment surrounding them from the broadcast and everything like that, whether or not you agree with me, I hope that my opinions or thoughts interact with your ideas about their team, and maybe you'll end up in some kind of middle ground where it's more reasonable, because if your position is that Fnatic is the favorite, or if that Fnatic is like the most talented team in the LEC, then I think you're mistaken. Because performance doesn't always line up with talent. And the reason why I focus so much on talent is because I think that it gets us closer to the upside cases, whereas recent performance is more like the median. So one classic sports example would be like the Lakers. The Lakers, when they had, I think, like Gary Payton, Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, I think they had Shaq at the same time too. It was a lot of players who were all very talented in their own right, but for one reason or another, they just weren't able to make that group of players mesh together in a way that was successful. And I guess it's kind of like that right now with the Lakers. Like they're not playing to the level that people thought. And when you get a lot of talented people together, you're not necessarily going to do great things. That's more of a cautionary tale for Vitality, because they are more of the true super team. But I think that people have a higher opinion of Fnatic's players than I do, which would essentially make Fnatic a super team as well. Wunder, one of the best top laners in LEC history, probably, in terms of like track record and international performances and stuff like that. He's a very good player. There was a decent amount of time where he was on a downtrend, and a lot of the times he would pick champions that would get abused in lane because his team wanted to function a certain way, and it really dragged down people's perception of him. I always thought Wunder was still a very talented player, and I think my history would show that if you wanted to go back and check the tape, check the videos that I would make about G2 when he was on there and they were struggling. Razork, I liked Razork a decent amount when he was on Misfits, when he was like an unknown player, but then once he gets onto a team like Fnatic, has some success with better talent around him, people want to say that he is something that I just think that he's not. In regards to Razork, he's probably in the second tier of junglers that are left in the playoffs. Malrong and Selfmade, I think, are both better players than Razork is. Razork has had a good split, and he does a very good job at creating pressure in the early game, but I think that a lot of that comes from good drafts and just the overall team strength, because they are a lot better than a lot of the other teams in the LEC. And when we see them consistently beating all the lower tier teams and then being competitive with like Rogue and Vitality and Misfits and the other teams, we will almost necessarily have a high opinion of them because we haven't seen them lose as often. But just because they haven't lost to bad teams doesn't mean that they're going to beat good teams. And that's the spot that I think we're in now, is that they're going to get much tougher competition in playoffs, just like everyone else will. But now we're moving into the portion of the season when talent really kind of triumphs everything. So if Fnatic goes in and beats Misfits or beats G2, people are going to feel like, see, I knew it. Fnatic is such a good team. They're going to go to the finals, and they're going to look great. And the fact that they're in the winner's bracket, if they win 2 matches, they're going to be in the finals, I think. So, yes, it is a very easy pathway for the people who are supporting Fnatic to get to that point where if they lose in the finals, you could say, oh, well, at least they made the finals. And then it's like you don't necessarily need to learn anything between here and there, because if Fnatic wins their first round matchup, nobody will be surprised. If Fnatic beats Rogue, no one's going to be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they beat Rogue. I just don't think that they should be the favorites against Rogue. And you might think that's like a hedge, but people who are following me for betting purposes and like my opinions on things because I try to be somewhat level-headed, that's really what we're talking about. Like the perception of Fnatic is that they will win more often against Rogue than what it is in reality, or at least what I think reality is. And I could be wrong. Obviously, I could be wrong. But that's why I talk about things the way that I do. And before I go on to the mid lane, I should say, with Yamato Cannon, I think that Yamato Cannon is a good coach, especially for Western standards. And I do like a lot of the drafts that Fnatic has. They play to the strength of their team. It's all very intelligent, but it's easier to draft during the regular season in best of ones when teams aren't necessarily tailoring their draft strategy to you specifically in a best of five, and they're kind of more focused on what's meta and like what trades you're supposed to make, what handshakes you're supposed to make in a draft. And that's not trying to say anything about Fnatic specifically, because they just draft better than a lot of other teams in general. And I talk a lot of garbage about Yamato Cannon because I know that people love talking about him and like him in general. And I do think he's overrated. But again, it's not that I think he's bad, although sometimes I do think he's bad. It's just that he's overrated. And it's not like you either love a player or you hate a player. Speaking of hate, Humanoid. And again, this has more to do with public sentiment than it does with Humanoid. I don't hate Humanoid as a person. I don't think that Humanoid is the worst mid laner in the LEC. I also don't think that he's a top 10 player in the world, like everybody was trying to tell me going into Worlds. Those are the kinds of things that stick with me and really annoy me. He's a Twisted Fate player. He's a glorified Twisted Fate player. And your argument could be, oh, well, Pykel. Showmaker's a Twisted Fate player. Does that mean that Showmaker is garbage? No, it doesn't mean that. You want to know why? Because Faker plays Twisted Fate to this level, and Humanoid is down at this level. So even within the realm of Twisted Fate specialization, he's not even the best there. And that's why you look at players like Niski, you look at players like Cryan, when they are essentially Twisted Fate players, that's almost all that, not all they can do, but that's what they are by far the best at. When they're forced on other champions, they just don't perform at that same level, and their teams don't have as much success. And like, if you can get Twisted Fate every single game, then fine. But if you're a team going against Fnatic and you're not banning Twisted Fate, or you're saying to yourself, "I'll just give it to them. We'll outplay it. Like, we'll have some kind of counter strategy." I really don't think that's the way to go. The way to go is just get rid of it, put him onto something else, and just let him feed. Because there were a couple games this split when Fnatic was looking shaky where he was just horrible. And it's not just that he has a couple of deaths. It's like a ton of deaths, a ton of positioning mistakes, and just really dragging the entire team down. And that's the kind of thing where there are certain players that like I really respect, that they're still trying to make plays because they're in a losing position and the only way to get back in the game is by making plays. But that's not really what it looks like with Humanoid a lot of the time. It looks like he's just out of position, essentially lost on the Rift. Wild Turtle-esque is how I should say it. Do I think that he is bad? No. But out of the 6 mid laners that are left in playoffs, the only one that I am positive that he is more talented than is Nuke Duck. The rest of them are all probably, in my mind, more talented than him. It doesn't mean that they will always beat him in a one-on-one. It doesn't mean that their team will always beat Fnatic. It means that when we look back at this period of time in League of Legends, we're going to say to ourselves, oh, wow, people thought Humanoid was good? He didn't really do much of anything besides play Twisted Fate and get carried by his teammates. Because how can we have such a high opinion of Humanoid when we should really have a high opinion of Upset and Hylissang? Upset is the best AD carry that's left in the tournament. And if Fnatic is successful in the playoffs, it's going to be due to Fnatic drafting intelligently around Upset and giving him all the resources that he needs and just letting him carry them in the late game team fights. If Humanoid gets Twisted Fate and Upset is on hyper carries, they're going to be very good. and they're going to be tough to deal with because Wonder's a flexible player. Razork, not really a very flexible player in my mind. Like he plays a lot of different champions, but he doesn't excel at all those different champions. But when you're on a team like this where you only kind of need to be the glue and pick a generically strong champion and kind of just run around and gank stuff, you can kind of do your job. So if Wonder's being flexible, helping facilitate the draft, Razork is, doing his job, which is not a very difficult job. Humanoid on something like Twisted Fate, Hyper Carry for Upset, and then Hylissang doing whatever he wants to because he's one of the best Western supports of all time. Like, that's fine. Like, it's a good strategy for Fnatic. I understand why they built their team this way. It's a good way to build a team. Would I personally rather have a different mid laner that could be more of a hard carry when the situation requires it? Yes. But I understand why having a player like Humanoid is beneficial for a team. But I think it's important to give that additional context and nuance because, like, we should just be realistic about it. That's really all I'm trying to get at. So, in regards to why I think they're going to lose, there's really two reasons. One, I think that Humanoid is a liability in the draft, but that's something that can be supplemented with good drafts from Fnatic, which they've had overall. So that would be the first reason why they potentially lose. The real reason why I'm afraid for Fnatic is because Jinx and Aphelios have been extremely dominant for the past probably year, maybe year and a half, in terms of when they were actually strong. Maybe not necessarily played at the same levels they are now in terms of frequency, but just extremely strong champions, and Upset is an extremely good Jinx and Aphelios player because he is a true hyper carry player. So if teams target Upset through the draft and force him into a utility spot, he will have much less of an impact in late game team fights, and that's really how you should attack Fnatic, I think. So you probably want to ban out as a couple of AD carries. First, pick a good one on blue side. Let them pick a utility AD carry. Let Hylissang play something aggressive in the bot lane. Let Humanoid play something aggressive outside of TF. And then just make them beat you. Because I don't think that playstyle is going to be easy for them to utilize against solid teams. So let's go like them against Rogue, right? So Wonder against Odoamne. They're both good players, really draft dependent. Razork against Malrong. I think that Malrong is a better player than Razork, especially in this kind of meta. And I don't think that we've seen the best of Malrong. He hasn't been asked to be a true hard carry jungler. We didn't really necessarily see that on Damwon either. But in order to get to that point where you are on Damwon and backing up Canyon, it's either he was stylistically different enough where if they theoretically needed to bring out Canyon, which they should never have to do, they could do it. Or Malrong was just very good in general, and they wanted the best available jungler to back up one of the best junglers in the world. That's probably more likely the case. Then with Humanoid against Larson. Larson's just a better player overall. I don't know what their drafts have looked like in the past. Like, that's one thing I should probably look at between Rogue and Fnatic. But I would expect Larson's champion pool can punish Twisted Fate. Not necessarily very hard in the laning phase, but would be a much larger damage threat in the late game. And then in the bot lane, Upset and Hylissang against Comp and Trimby. And that's the spot that Fnatic has an advantage. And it doesn't really bother me to say that. Like, I think that Upset and Hylissang are S tier, Comp and Trimby are A tier. But will the drafts allow them to use that talent difference? Because if it's a utility AD carry meta, it's not going to matter as much. It just really won't. Unless they kind of subvert that meta by playing aggressive playmakers in the AD carry position, which we don't really see Upset do very often. So ultimately, I think that Fnatic will most likely win their first round matchup. I think that they'll probably lose their second round matchup. And then I hope it's Fnatic against Vitality in the semis. and I hope that Vitality beats them. That's really the situation that would give me the most satisfaction. So that's what I'm rooting for. So if you like this video, even if you disagree with my opinion, if you understand why I feel the way that I do, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. If you're a Humanoid fanboy, sorry if I hurt your feelings. If you want to support the channel, check out thrivefantasy.com, promo code PIKEL. You get up to a 100% deposit match. No, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. That's important. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.